afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Yun Lu. Thank you for joining our educational talk. The talks are organized by CAPA HC, Chinese American Parent Association of Howard County. And this event is sponsored by COED, Howard County Community Organizations Active in Disaster. Today, our Howard County police officers, Cpl Marc Lay and Private First Class Stella Dieu will present Working with Police 101. The suggested audience is 6 to 12 graders. Adults are welcome too. Cpl Marc Lay has been with Howard County Police Department for almost 21 years. He has worked in Patrol Special Assignment Section, Executive Protection Unit, Warrant Fugitive Unit, and is currently in the Community Outreach Section. Private First Class Stella Dieu has been with Howard County Police Department for over 8 years. She worked day shift and night shift. Patrol and is currently Asian Liaison Officer in the Community Outreach Section. We appreciate the service and the dedication of our police officers. We will learn about how police officers handle various situations and how residents can cooperate with police officers to make Howard County a better home for all of us. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So we thought we would first start off with kind of introducing you to the staff within our community outreach section and tell you who they are and kind of what they do, and then just kind of give you a brief overview of the community outreach section, what we do.
Great, thank you.
So first we have Sergeant John Lloyd, who is on the call, and myself, Cpl Marc Lay. We're the supervisors in the section.
Hello, everyone. Just want to just say hello to everyone that's there. Like Cpl Marc Lay said, I'm John Lloyd. I'm the sergeant of the community outreach section. And in the next few slides, you'll see all the officers who I work with and who all do a phenomenal job. We've got several officers within the section, and our job is to bridge the gap between different cultural and minority groups within the county, and just try to make people feel a little bit more comfortable with the police in their neighborhoods. So go ahead, continue on.
And we have, as you have met, Officer Stella Dieu. She's the Asian Community Liaison. We have Christopher
Hello.
Cromwell. He's our Multicultural Liaison. Pfc William Kreitzer is our Senior Community Liaison. And we have a Northern and Southern District Community Liaisons, and Northern District is Pfc Casey Vu, and Pfc Stephen Mitchell is the Southern District Community Resource Officer. In the Howard County Police Department, our main focus is in community policing and engaging the public, you know, developing those partnerships and working with problem-solving strategies to get together. And our aim is to build that trust within the community so they can feel that everything is, you know, if there's a problem, an issue, they can bring it up to us and then we will help them out and solve that problem. And that is part of our main targeted job in community outreach section. We can go to the next slide, please, Stella. Like I said, the community outreach section, that is our biggest purpose and our focus. We need to attend these community meetings, attend presentations like this, you know, interact with seniors, the multicultural, the Asian populations. We go to these community meetings, HOA meetings, and that is our main focus that we go through. Everything we do is to try and build that trust with the community. And we encourage you all, if you ever want us to come out to any meetings like this, you can request us on the online request form, and we'll come out and we do various presentations such as active shooter awareness, workplace and safety and awareness, crime prevention. You know, we can do a lot of different presentations out there if you're interested.
Working with Police 101, you know, the whole concept between community policing is that, you know, we want to have a good relationship with the community. And in order to do that, it's a two-way street. You know, we put out the effort and we hope that the community will also put out the effort so that we can build a strong, trusting relationship. You know, we can't do that without the community's cooperation. So, you know, a lot of times you'll see police officers out in your community, whether they're on a call or just, you know, doing a foot patrol and getting to know their neighborhood. And, you know, we encourage you guys to say hello, you know, don't be afraid of us. We're here to help you. And it's always a good time for us to talk to people and get to know, if, you know, what the problems are in the community. So that's a great time that if you see a police officer out, just talk to them. If you have an issue with a neighbor or just an issue within the neighborhood, let us know, because we won't know unless you guys tell us. Typically, we respond out to a community because someone calls 911 when they have an issue, and there are times when people don't call at all. So we just don't know unless, there's an open line of communication and you guys tell us what's going on. So it's really important that, the community is there to support us and also help us do our job better by telling us, what we can do to help you. What we wanted to discuss is if you are a victim of a crime. So for instance, let's say somebody breaks into your house, what do you do? First thing is you don't want to touch anything. The reason why is we can actually try and lift fingerprints off of the crime scene, whether it's your vehicle or the house. So just make sure you don't touch anything and you call the police right away. You can obviously call 911, or we actually have a non-emergency number, which you can see on there. And just, when an officer comes out, they're gonna ask you a lot of questions. And those questions are not to try and be invasive, they're just so that we can figure out what happened and how we can get as much details as possible to solve the crime. And we hope that we can solve the crime, but there are times when we don't. And the reason being is that sometimes we don't have a lot of information. All we get is somebody broke into the house, there was no witnesses, nobody saw anything, and so we have no idea who the suspect is, whether it's a male or a female, whether it's an adult or a child, so very little to work with, and so sometimes things don't get resolved like we'd want them to. But every officer does try and solve the crime to the best of their ability, given the evidence that they have. And then so once we actually do find a suspect and we have enough evidence against them, the officer will file for charges, or sometimes they'll request that the victim file for charges depending on the crime. So one of the questions that we got from you guys was what programs are offered by us to build trust and understanding between the police and their communities. There's a bunch of stuff I wrote on here. Some things I specifically wanted to talk about was the first bulletin, which is Coffee with a Cop. Basically what we do is, we will choose a different coffee shop or even like a Wegmans or a restaurant once a month. We'll go out there from 9 to 11. You get free coffee. It's, not a bad deal at all. And we are there to just talk to you if you have any questions. There's no agenda. And it's just so you can get to know us and we can get to know you. And we do try and change that, with different areas. One day we'll be in Columbia, next month we might be in Lake City. So it's always changing. The next couple of things that I like is Shop with a Cop, which you can see the picture there. The officer actually, we will go to Target or it was Toys R Us, and each child would have a certain amount of money that they were allotted, and they could go out and pick as many toys as they wanted. And then we do those kinds of things to show the community that we're there to support them, and that we're there to just try and do better and help the community and show them that we're just not police officers with a badge and a gun, that we do have a heart. So just if you want to participate in any of those things, we encourage you guys to do that. And then like Corporal Mark mentioned, we have formal and informal partnerships with the community to try and build that trust as well. So one of the other programs I wanted to talk about, since this is centered towards a lot of youth, is our Youth Advisory Council, which is designed to provide youth with a safe and engaging environment to interact with us. They meet once a month with members of the police department, and they basically advise our chief, which is Chief Myers, on their concerns pertaining to them. It's a very good way to be able to build leadership skills and also voice your concern. You can also earn student service hours, and it's just a good way to engage with your community and try and give back, especially if you have a concern with the community and you get to have, basically a one-on-one meeting with the chief. The next program we have is the Youth Police Academy. You apply online. It's a free police academy for our youth. It's 1 week long. You actually do spend the night there. They teach you leadership opportunities, life skills, and you do a lot of team building exercises. But they also kind of show you, if you have any interest being a police officer, of some of the things that you might encounter as a police officer. Obviously, they're mock exercises, but you can see, they're doing a traffic stop, or they're on the radio trying to, figure out how you use the radio. They'll teach them like crime scene processing, which I mentioned is, you can try and lift fingerprints off of a window or a vehicle like that. And then also trying to go over just techniques and like criminal justice instructions as well. And then one of the really cool things is our simulator. So simulator is basically kind of like a 3D green screen, if you will. And you'll go in there, you'll have a fake gun, and it's completely audio and video. And something will show up on the screen, whether it's a person, and you actually are interactive with the person and talking to them. And then it reacts to what you're saying. So a very common one is, a person with a knife. How do you deal with that situation? It places the person in that situation without putting yourself in danger, to see how you would react and how the suspect reacts to what you are saying. So a very good thing if any of you guys are interested. And then our next one is our teen court. So if anybody is interested in being an attorney, basically you get to sit in on actually real life cases that are pertaining to juveniles that are first-time misdemeanors. You'll hear their case, and you will basically give a disposition on what you think the cause should be for their crime. So for instance, if a juvenile is caught stealing, what would your suggestion be on their consequence, whether it's community service, educational programs, or an apology letter to the person that they stole something from. So it's a great way to, be in the court system and learn how it operates. And obviously, number one thing is you can earn student service hours as well. Our other program that we have is our Bear Tracks Camp. So it is a week-long overnight camp. They usually go up into the mountains, and it's a mentorship program that's designed to, build a relationship between police officers and the youth. And typically, sometimes kids that grow up without having a dad may need a role model in their life. And so a police officer can act as that mentor to help the child develop socially and emotionally, and just have a type of leadership in their life that they may not have. With that being said, in order to be a part of it, usually a school counselor or somebody at the school would recommend the student for Bear Tracks, and that's how you would go into it. And they teach a lot of things in the camp, like social lessons, issues that really pertain to youth, like bullying, anger management, and just personal safety. And a lot of times gang awareness. So some things that, the youth might be interested in. And then another program that we have for our youth is the Explorer Post. It's a completely volunteer program, and it's basically anybody who is interested in law enforcement and also somebody who wants to give back to their community. A lot of times we hear kids asking, and even adults asking, how do I make my community better, or what can I do? What can you do? You can volunteer and be a part of the solution. And so it allows youth to gain insight in what we do and how they can give back to their community, whether they're helping pick up trash or direct traffic because of a storm or something. And it's just a good way to work with police and have a mentor in your life if you live in Howard County. So I would highly suggest looking it up. And I think I'll turn over to Officer Mark.
The community athletic program is one of my favorite programs that we have. It's during the summer. We have a trailer that they hook up to a pickup truck, and it has sports gear, games, video games, and it's all the school resource officers. Obviously, during the summer, they're not in school, so they're out there interacting with the public. They set it up so each week they're going to different either neighborhood parks. Sometimes they'll go to Blandera Park, and then they'll go to a school in Harper's Choice. So they're bouncing around different sites throughout the week. And again, this is about building relationships with some kids that you see that if you're a school resource officer, you may see kids that are not in your school yet. Maybe they're younger, maybe they're middle school, and then you're going to see them coming up. So again, that just fosters that relationship of, between the youth and the police. And then also, we all know that anytime you're playing a sport, that also kind of plays into the team building and having a good relationship and, working together. And then our pledge camp is also another camp we have. And as you see there, it stands for Pride, Leadership, Education, Diversity, Gang Resistance, and Evaluation. This is another free one-week camp that we have for students entering 9th grade. And it's one of those things where we want to develop those leadership skills and just life skills in general. The lessons and the activities that they're doing are to make critical decisions, focus on the core beliefs and values. Like Officer Stella said earlier, some of these kids don't grow up in a regular family structure, so they don't know what it's like to have someone tell them the regimen and things what to do. And that's the things we're trying to teach them to make those life skills to have them a better life. And of course, it includes a field trip to Terre Haute Adventures, which is a lot of fun for the kids and for the officers involved.
So one of the other questions we had was, how do you become a police officer? So I just listed like the standards that we have, which is pretty generic for a lot of agencies in Maryland. Obviously, U.S. citizen, you have to be 21 years old by the time you graduate, and the only reason is because that's the official age for you to have a gun. So you could be 20 technically, and then in the academy, and as long as by the time your graduation ceremony you're 21, then you're okay. You have to have 60 college credits or 2 years military service or 2 years police service at another agency. That's something that is, I would consider a higher standard because there are some police departments in Maryland that you actually don't need any college credits or any military service. So not as much education. Obviously must possess a driver's license. The application now is pretty easy. You just go online. Everything is online. You fill it out, and then it will tell you a date that you can go in to take a written exam, which is a 100-question exam. Pretty simple and straightforward, just basically knowing how to read and write and math skills and how to read a map. And then if you pass the written test, you move on to the physical exam. And the physical consists of sit-ups, push-ups, and a 1.5-mile run. And the standards are based upon if you're a male, female, and then your age group. So if you're, let's say, a female from 20 to 30, you have a certain sit-ups and push-ups and 1.5 miles that you have to run it by. And it increases as age goes up. If you pass that, then they will schedule an interview for you. And if you pass the interview, you get to go into the background investigation. You do take a polygraph, and then they have a psychological and then just a physical test from your doctor. I would say that our department has probably the highest standards. A lot of people actually don't pass our physical, they don't come prepared, and they don't realize that a 1.5 mile run is a lot harder than it seems if you've never run before. So if that's something you're interested in, I would highly suggest you just got to work out and practice 2 miles a couple times a week, and then hopefully you'll be able to pass our test. So another question we had is, what kind of training does a police officer receive in the academy? We receive a lot of training. So when I went through the academy 8 years ago, it was 37 weeks, which was a full 7 months. Now it's about 31, 32 weeks, I believe, which is a lot less than what I had to go through. But it's just, they're trying to teach you everything you need to know to be a police officer. So one of the things is that when I was going through colleges, you don't have to have a criminal justice degree to be a police officer. You can have an art degree, you can have a math degree. We have doctors that became police officers in our department. So the academy is there so that they can teach you everything you need to know to do your job well. And so you can see some of the things that we learn. Most importantly, especially right now, is de-escalation techniques. You learn how to drive your patrol vehicle to the maximum capacity, whether you're taking in a vehicle pursuit or driving in a city-like area. They teach you everything you need to know. If you never shot a gun before, they'll teach you how to handle it. They'll teach you how to take it apart, clean it, and properly shoot it. So, you know, everything that you need to do to be a police officer, they're going to teach you. So nothing to ever worry about. The other questions we got was how many police officers in our department are of Asian descent, and that is, excuse me, about 6% of our sworn police officers are Asian, and so that comes out to about 27 police officers.
Part of this presentation is too, we are trying to recruit people. So if you have anybody that's interested in your community, we would love to raise that number up higher. So that's another part of the communication and helping each other out here. So if you all can pass that on, you know, we would love to have more Asian officers.
Another question we got was, how do you file a police report for a resident with a language barrier? So all of our dispatchers have access to a language line. So basically, if you call in, if you can at least convey what language you speak, whether it's Korean, Chinese, Mandarin or Cantonese, just try and convey that, and our dispatcher can actually call this number. They will tell them what language you speak, and it was basically a three-way call. So that way you will talk to the person on the phone, which will relay that information to our dispatcher. And then that way they can send out a police officer based on what you need. And if the police officer doesn't speak the language that you primarily speak, they can also call that language line as well. So never an issue if you have to report something, or you know, you want to help your neighbor. We always have access to that. It's 24 hours. So feel free to call. You know, don't feel like if you don't speak good enough English that you can't call, because, you know, we have the resources to help you out. So one of the other questions we got was what to expect when stopped by a police officer. I know that probably half of you guys are not old enough to drive yet, but the other half may drive. So I just wanted to go over some things that you should know when a police officer pulls you over. So if you're driving and a police officer comes behind you, they're going to turn on their red and blue lights. If you see that, just try and safely pull over to the shoulder. I would suggest just pulling over to the right-hand shoulder, because that's the slow shoulder. And you don't have to do it in a hurry. You know, when there's an officer behind you, you feel like, oh my gosh, I need to get over right away. Just take your time and do it safely. Sometimes they will turn on their siren if they feel that you're not pulling over fast enough, and that's usually because it's been a couple minutes, and I've had that happen before, where people just don't look in their rearview mirror. So just pull over on the slow shoulder, out of traffic. Try and give yourself enough room so that, you know, you don't get hit by another car, because that typically sometimes does happen. And if you can, just use your turn signal to tell the officer whether you're going to the right or the left, just to let us know where you're going. So that way, you know, we don't get hit and you guys don't get hit by another car, because people just don't pay attention. When an officer comes up to your car, all you have to do is just roll down your window. I ask that, you know, you turn off your radio, because it's really hard for us to hear you when there's cars driving by. It's very loud for us. Sometimes we have a mic in our ear, which makes it even more difficult to hear you. So if you could just kindly turn the radio down, so that way we can better speak to you. If you are stopped at nighttime, I would suggest if you just turn on the light in the car, so that way, you know, we can see everything in the car. The reason why that there's so much tension between, you know, a traffic stop is that, you know, that's one of the most dangerous things that a police officer does. We have no idea who's in the car. We have no idea what's in the car. So the more that you can make us feel comfortable, the more we can make you feel at ease as well, because, you know, we don't want something to happen where we don't see something in the car, and it's just a whole nother mess that, you know, nobody wants to deal with. So just try and turn on your interior lights if you can. Sometimes a second officer does arrive, and it's pretty common practice. That's just for our safety. It doesn't mean anything on you. And typically they'll just go on the other side of the car, just to be basically a second set of eyes. When the officer asks for your driver's license and a vehicle registration, you can give it to them. But if they don't ask right away, just keep your hands on the steering wheel. They'll tell you what they need. And if they ask for the driver's license registration, you do have to give it to them, because it is Maryland law that if an officer asks for your driver's license and registration, you have to give that to them. And sometimes if you have a passenger, they will ask for the identification of the passenger. You know, one of the most important things in a traffic stop is that you try and remain calm and comply with the officer's instructions. Most of our officers in Howard County are really great, and they should not give you any problems. You know, we will be calm as long as you're calm too. So it's a two-way street, you know, and we will try to communicate to you what we're doing. After they get your license and registration, they'll go back to their car. And then if they give you a citation, sometimes they will ask that you sign it. Signing it is not an admission of guilt. It's basically to show that you got receipt of a citation. That's all. So don't feel that.
Comfortable?
My leg's getting too stretched out.
No, you should take it away from me.
You take it away from me, you.
Okay, I think that's over. So, you know, they'll give you the citation back. And like I said, you may sign it, or you, sometimes they don't have you sign it. It depends on the citation. Most of our citations are computer automated, and so that doesn't require a signature. But if they handwrite a citation, then it does require a signature to say that you received the citation. One of the most important things is we as humans, and I myself have done it, where, you know, you kind of want to give an explanation or argue, and it's just kind of not the time and place. First, because of safety reasons, you know, officers and people that have been on the side of roads have been hit by other cars that aren't paying attention. So it's always best to just try and get out of the roadway as possible, right? So if you don't agree with a citation, you don't agree with what the officer said, that's your right. And all you have to do is go to court, and you can tell the judge why you don't think that you deserve a citation, or, you know, your justification for it. And the officer will have to show up in court as well, and that's kind of your way of explaining your actions. So, you know, don't feel like, you know, you should have an argument with the officer on the side of the road. It's just not the time and place. And it's just, you know, we want you guys to get off the road as quickly as possible so nobody gets hurt. Lastly, we had a couple questions about traffic accidents and bike safety. I would say that one of the #1 reasons why we have a bunch of accidents is just distracted driving. Distracted driving means that you're not paying attention. So with cell phones now, it's just a horrendous how many people you see when you're driving, you look over and they're on their cell phone, just looking at their phone and driving at the same time. Well, if you're looking at your phone, you're not keeping your eyes on the road, and your reaction time is a lot slower. So you have to make sure that you're not distracted when you're driving. So that means if you need your phone for directions, you get the directions on your phone before you start driving. You put it up on a little, the case or a mount, and then you leave it there, and you can go to your destination. Just try to, you know, get those things out of the way so you're not fiddling with your phone. And another part of distracted driving is having people in the car. You know, when you have a lot of people in the car and your friends, and you guys are having a good time with the music up, you know, you guys are chit-chatting and you're turning over talking or whatever, and you're not paying attention. And it, you know, the safety of you and the people in the car should be most important to you. So you want to make sure that you pay attention when you're driving. And then obviously the other cause of a lot of accidents is driving under the influence. So that's, you know, driving under the influence of drugs, includes marijuana, under alcohol, you name it. So, you know, that's the reason why we have traffic accidents, just people not making right decisions. So you just want to make sure that you don't drive distracted, and you just pay attention to the road. A little bit about the bike safety. Oh, I'm sorry, let's go back to accidents. So what happens if you're involved in an accident, or if you see somebody in an accident? You want to make sure if you're involved in it, you stop where you are, or move to a safe part of the road where you're out of the roadway if you can, and you call 911. The dispatcher is going to ask where you are. So most important, always know where you are, give them the location, and then if anybody's injured, whether it's you or if you've been able to talk to the other vehicles involved, just to make sure that nobody's injured. And then they'll ask for vehicle descriptions and all that if you have it. If you don't, that's fine, not a big deal. Most importantly, it's just the location of where you are. And that goes the same if you witness an accident. you call a dispatcher and you tell them where the accident occurred, and they'll have an officer come by and check for the accident. And then on to bike safety. If you like to ride bikes in the roadway, that's fine. If there is a bike lane, I highly suggest using it. That's what it's there for. Or if you have an area of the shoulder where there's a line but not a dedicated bike lane, that's a much better area to bike in. Obviously, you are allowed to bike in the roadway, and to try and, improve your safety, try and notify the people behind you where you're turning. So, you can use the hand signals if you're going to be making a right or a left or going straight, or if you're stopping, and then making sure that you invest in lights on your bike or on your clothing with reflective clothing, because sometimes, especially in the early morning or late hours, it's really hard to see somebody biking. So you just want to make sure that people can see you, so that way they, you don't get hit or anything like that. All right, I'll throw it over to Sergeant John.
All right. So there were a few other questions that were asked that I felt more appropriate for me to answer, and they won't necessarily take too long to get through, but we have about 7 more slides to go for anyone who was wondering how much longer we have. One of the questions was the police department's priorities and how are they set. So every year, the chief's office will provide members an annual list of departmental goals and objectives. These objectives are based on officer and community input, current trends, and departmental needs. The most recent one that came out for this upcoming year, the department wants to work on strengthening and building trust. Clearly, with the current climate with policing in the United States, strengthening and building trust is probably one of the most important things that we need to handle right now. Enhancing safety and security, and leveraging technology and maximizing efficiency. Some of those things are pretty standard and things that we're working on every single year, every single day. Enhancing safety and security, that's the police department's job. So every year, every day, we're working on those. Next one. Another question was regarding emergency calls for service. How are these events reported by incoming calls? Any finding of bias when prioritizing these events? And what's the average response time to an event with high priority? So no, there is no bias in when these calls are reported. Calls come in and they're handled as they come in. So if you were the first person to call, well, your call is going to be heard first. Now, does that mean it's going to be dispatched first? Well, that depends on the priority. So those things are set by level of severity. And for one, is the call in progress? If it's in progress, well, that's probably something that's going to be coming out right away. If it's something that happened 2 hours ago and it's a theft, well, that can probably hold for a little bit of time. Is there a weapon involved? If a call is in progress and there's a weapon involved, well, that's going to be dispatched immediately. The question about response times, those things are a little interesting because we have a western end, which sometimes takes longer to get to. I recently found a website that the department is recommending we use to display some of the facts and statistics on response times and other things. So I know this is going to be saved for everyone, but if anyone's interested in a lot of the response times and a lot of other information that I wasn't even aware of that we have, go to dash.howardcountymd.gov and click on Safe and Engaged Communities. You'll see a lot of cool information there that you'll be surprised to read. I think it's pretty interesting. Next one. What does the Howard County Police Department currently have for checking officers' conduct is fair, respectful, impartial? What does the police department do in detecting mistakes or abuses of authority? Good question right now, and there are a few things. There's an early warning system that the Howard County Police Department has implemented for a very long time. And the early warning system basically is something that if an officer has been using force or getting complaints more often than others, those things are always tracked. And if they hit a certain mark, if we're seeing a rise in complaints for that officer or uses of force, that triggers an early warning system where then the internal affairs section will then look into what's going on with this person. Is this a pattern of behavior that we need to be concerned with, or are some of these things justified? That's a very important thing that we have implemented that probably should be implemented all over the country if it's not. Supervisor contact and report checking. Being a patrol supervisor, that's something that we do constantly. A lot of us like to go to the calls that our officers are on, not because we're always necessarily checking up on them, but we want to make sure that things are being handled properly, that people are being treated the way they're supposed to be treated. And when we do the report checking, we're making sure that what they're saying is accurate. So we were on the call. Are they writing exactly what happened? And if not, well, we have a problem. Also, we're making sure that even if we weren't there, what they're writing in the report, is that the way the department asks you to do things. We have general orders and guidelines, and those things need to be followed. So I look at every single report that comes through. I have to sign off on that report. There's also report checking that the watch commander will do, which is a step above the sergeant. Usually that's a lieutenant. They will do random checks of reports as well to make sure that, one, the officer is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then two, that the sergeant is actually reading these reports and not signing them if they're not supposed to be signed if there's a problem. There's also internal audits that are done, which is similar to the early warning system, checking to see if, if certain officers are stopping certain minority groups more than others. Those things are accounted for and checked to make sure that there's not a bias. Something that's also going on that's very recent is we're having a new professional standards bureau, a brand new bureau that should be coming out at some point soon. And that's to allow for additional resources and focus on oversight, compliance, and inspections that help promote quality service and public confidence. So that's something I don't have too much information on at the moment. That's something that is building. That probably came from a lot of the current climate out there, that we're trying to make sure that we are several steps ahead of the game. Next one. What's considered as a hate crime, and has the police department received any Asian hate bias reports, and how are they resolved? So we'll go to the definition of a hate or bias crime is an act that appears to be motivated or is perceived by the victim to be motivated all or in part by race, color, religious beliefs, national origin, ethnic background, sexual orientation, or disability. Looking through our database, I found one HBI that was targeting Asians, which happened in June of this year. So it's not something that is widespread, at least in this county, but does that mean that there's not a lot more that happened? I'm sure that there are probably a lot more, or at least there are more, but they're just not being reported. So right now we have one, and they're investigated as thoroughly as any call that you can have. They're the one few calls that we have where a captain, which is, there's the sergeant, which is my level, then there's a lieutenant, then there's a captain above that level. Every HBI report that an officer takes and investigates, it cannot be closed until the captain is satisfied that that officer did enough. So that's just checks and balances all the way through. That is making sure that the officer is doing what they're supposed to do and investigating this to their best ability. Two, that the sergeant is doing their best to make sure that the officer investigates it as thoroughly as they can. And it falls back on a lieutenant as well, making sure that everyone from the bottom to the top is taking this as seriously as it can be. And the captain will not allow it to be closed out until they are satisfied. Now, that doesn't mean that someone will be charged. That depends on a lot of different factors. But the captain needs to look at it and say, all right, that officer did exactly what they were supposed to do. They tried their best. Charges were filed. And if they weren't, they went above and beyond to try to satisfy that complaint. What is the process in handling complaints from the public? Who's responsible for handling the investigation? Is the public notified about the results? And is there any involvement from the public? So it's a pretty lengthy question there, and formal complaints are handled through the internal affairs process. By formal complaints, I mean something that is most likely a violation of our general orders. Formal complaints are handled through the internal affairs section. There are other things that we call inquiries, which are possibly, let's say an officer was rude, or at least you felt that they were rude. That's something that the sergeant on my level would handle and take care of. That doesn't rise to the level of probably a general order violation or a policy violation. In those cases, I would speak to the complainant and ask them, well, what happened? Okay, give me all the details. How did that make you feel? Okay, based on that, I then need to speak to the officer and figure out their side and see what happened, and then come to some sort of conclusion. If the officer was rude, well, I need to address that. If it rises to the level where there needs to be a counseling form, verbal reprimand, those things all depend on officer previous history, what the complainant wants. Me personally, I've always liked to ask the complainant, give me all the facts, and are you satisfied with what my conclusion is going to be? And if they say, yes, I'm satisfied with what you are planning on doing, well, then we'll go that route. But if they say, absolutely not, I want something more done, well, then I'll take that up the chain a little bit more so as to make sure that we're handling things properly. The internal affairs process can be found, at least online. won't necessarily go through the whole process, but it is quite lengthy. But I put the link there, and that's how you kind of get to it. And you can see what the process is and roughly how long it takes. It can take months and months to finish certain internal affairs violations. And interesting thing is you can find it in English, Spanish, and Korean. Now, if you do file a formal complaint, one thing I do want to let you know is those things are updated at least every 30 days, and the final conclusion is sent to the initial complainant after the investigation is over. Now, that doesn't mean you won't be updated during. You could also call the investigator. There will be someone assigned to it, and you could obviously call them at any point and ask for an update. But you'll get an update every 30 days, and then once the final conclusion is set, you'll be contacted by the detective and also mailed the final results. Next. All right, someone wanted to know what the budget for the police department is. This is something that I actually found online, and it actually had a combination of all of the county governments. So what we did was we just pretty much copied the top 5 that were there. I believe that's 5. We can see that the Howard County Public School System gets by far the most money out of everyone in the entire county. Then you're looking at Public Works, Fire and Rescue Services, and then we're coming in at number 4 there. And then County Administration is just below us. So if anyone was interested in how much of what the budget is for the police department or really the public school system or anyone, it's right there for you. Pretty interesting stuff. Next. All right, what rights does a citizen have and how should they respond when approached by a police officer on a reasonable suspicion or probable cause? Those questions are sometimes difficult to answer. So what I wanted to do was just state what the two are. So reasonable suspicion is a legal standard of proof that is less than probable cause. Reasonable and articulable suspicion that a person is, has, or is about to commit a crime can allow a police officer to stop and detain that person based on that suspicion. So what that means, in other words, is based on our training, knowledge, and experience, sometimes we'll know that something is just not right, but it can't be, it has to be a little bit more than a hunch. Now, some of these facts alone might not be enough to detain you, but once you compile them all together, well, then perhaps that does make a case for you being detained to see what's going on. An example I have is, and this is an extreme example, but let's say that there's a large event and, you know, someone is wearing a backpack. Young guy's wearing a backpack. Well, that in itself is not strange, but maybe you notice that, well, no one else has a backpack on. This person decides to drop this backpack near the finish line of the race. And okay, all right, maybe you just forgot it, lost in thought. That alone, maybe not enough to cause too much concern, but now you've got 2 different things you're looking at. Now this person looks a little nervous. They're looking around a little bit. All right, well, now we're starting to build a case here for a reasonable suspicion that there's something up. We need to stop this person, see what they're up to, and obviously if they're leaving their backpack behind, that's not usually likely. You're not necessarily going to leave your backpack. So what's that person up to? What's inside that backpack? We probably need to figure that out because we don't want anyone to get hurt. So that's kind of what reasonable suspicion is, and reasonable suspicion can form into probable cause, which is probable cause is just it's another standard of proof that is obviously more than reasonable suspicion. That tells us there's definitely something here. We absolutely saw what you did. We know that there's something in that bag based on whatever evidence we've been able to come up with previously or currently. One thing, because that is a really gray area with some things, the best thing to do if you're in this case and you're not really sure, you know, am I being detained? Is this reasonable suspicion or probable cause? The question is, am I being detained? The officer will advise to you whether you are being detained or not. Sometimes we are just simply, we have a hunch. So maybe we'll ask you some questions, but we don't have the legal right to detain you at that point. So the question could be, am I being detained? The officer will say, no, you're not, but I'd like to ask you some questions. Okay, if I'm not being detained, you're free to go. Now, obviously, if you ask that question, the officer says, yes, you are being detained, then you're being detained. You are not free to leave at that point. Next. All right, that looks like that ends our presentation. So thank you very much. Stella, you want to chime in back in here?
Yes, thank you so much for having us. Obviously, my first presentation with you guys. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to having other meetings with you guys. If there's something that you guys want to specifically talk about or have a topic, we'd be more than happy to do that. We got a lot of questions this time around, so a lot of our presentation was on the questions because there were so many. But if there is an actual topic without questions, we would be more than happy to do this again. Thank you so much, guys.
I do see one question that came into the chat that I'll address real quick, if Doctor, if you don't mind.
There are 2 questions. Yeah. Do you want me to read it to you?
I see it right here. I'll answer the last one from Trinity Chang. Hopefully
Okay.
I said that name correctly. It says, I've noticed that people seem to be neglecting basic traffic rules in the River Hill High School parking lot, drifting, speeding, occupying handicap parking, park on imaginary shoulders, such as this is a very dangerous for pedestrians as well as other drivers. Do you have any thoughts on what can be done and who should be contacted to improve the situation? Traffic things are very, very frustrating. There's 2 things that we can do here. If I can get, and if whoever wrote, if Trinity, if you can write in maybe the time frame, we can ask officers to stop by during that time frame, during their normal patrols, and check on the situation. The other thing to do is if you're seeing this actively occurring, we put in the non-emergency number in this slide previously. You can call the number and say, hey, these things are going on right now. Can you send an officer out to check on it? If they go there, maybe they won't write any citations or whatever based on the situation, but maybe they'll ask them to leave, or they could write citation. It really depends. We have been getting quite a few complaints about drifting and speeding. These things have typically been happening in the nighttime hours. And I do know officers have stopped and cited some of these people when we're able to catch them. Sometimes we're not going to necessarily pursue people who are fleeing from us in some of these minor circumstances, but that's not necessarily something that's too hard to address. So if you have a time frame, we can put out area checks for it, or like I said, call it when you see it and an officer will stop by.
Thank you, officers. On Tuesday night, actually, a very tragic accident happened for River Hill student.
Yes.
A senior died at the scene. He was only 17. So lots of parents very concerned about driving safety, especially for young drivers. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for those young drivers? And what are the common mistakes that they make, and how can we reduce the risk of having accidents in the future?
Well, I'll kind of, I mean, that's not easy. I will tell you that I was obviously a young driver, and you make a lot of bad decisions when you're a young driver. There are programs within the schools that promote traffic safety, and I believe we might have a program or 2 on it, but I don't know the name of the program off top. But if I can find it, I'll send it to you. Maybe you can distribute it to your contacts. Stella, do you, or Mark, do you remember what program?
Yeah, it's called the CAT program. It's the Collision Avoidance Training. CAT, C-A-T is the acronym they use. Yeah, so it's the Collision Avoidance Training, and it's on our website. And I'm not sure with everything with the pandemic right now when they're going to pick it back up again, but I actually had my daughter go through it, and it's a very good program. They teach you, you know, how to avoid if you're going into a skid, which way you need to steer out of it, you know, so it's hands-on training. They do some classroom, and then they do some hands-on training outside, actually driving your personal vehicles that you're driving all the time. So it's a very good program.
All right, that's what I was talking about. So if anyone, sometimes links are hard to find or you're hard to remember. If anyone can just remember Howard County Police Community Outreach, that will send you to our front page, and it has a lot of youth programs, and you should see the collision avoidance training as one of the options. Like Officer Mark said, we may not be doing it right this second because of COVID. We're kind of keeping a distance between people sometimes, but that's something I'm certain we're going to pick back up once we start, I guess, getting back to our new normal.
Thank you, officers. Yeah, I saw that Officer Stella put it in the chat, is collision avoidance training. So for the parents and also young drivers, please check out the website. And hopefully that the COVID-19 pandemic will be over soon, and we can go back to normal and resume all those very interesting programs.
Absolutely. We have a lot of cool programs. So I know we mentioned some of those in the slides, but going to our website, you'll see quite a few things that you didn't realize that the police department is involved in. We have a lot of good programs that we can't wait to get back to.
Yeah, great. And we are looking forward to participating in those programs. You guys have
Awesome.
really nice programs. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you. Thank you so much.
Very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
officer.
you.
Thank you for your service.
Bye-bye. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good
Appreciate
night.
it.